Hi, my name is Tarasani, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Heart and Mind Foundation, and this is an interview with Dr. Rudy Tanzi, an Alzheimer's researcher and a keyboard player.
As someone who researches Alzheimer's disease and also plays the keyboard, how do you personally see the intersection of neuroscience and creative expression in music?
Well, music has a huge effect. Music memory is remarkably preserved in Alzheimer's disease patients. The pathology goes all the way around it. So early in the disease, you can use music to help calm a patient down who's terrified at their personality and memory beginning to disappear, right? It's a horrific experience. And hearing music that they loved between the ages of, let's say, 12 and 25, that's the music you bond with. And that's the music that emotionally stimulates you. If you emotionally stimulate the music memory area, you turn on the hippocampus, which is the main part of the brain for short-term memory affected in Alzheimer's disease. And then later on, you can have someone who's more or less vegetative all day. And if they play piano, you put them in front of a piano and they wake up and they stop playing music. There's a documentary called Alive Inside, where music stays alive inside with you. So I always like to say music is the gift that keeps on giving, because no matter how old you are or what's happening in your brain, music is going to stimulate you and it's going to help you. And I think I'd also say that for Parkinson patients, music with drumming a certain rhythm helps with them when they're doing therapy to walk with a normal gait again. I know the drummer from the band Boston, a friend of mine, he goes out and brings drumming circles to senior living centers. And by drumming together, it stimulates the music memory, stimulates the brain. So there's all kinds of ways music can help. And finally, I'll say that patients who decide to learn how to play a piano, even in a rudimentary way, when they're in the early stages of Alzheimer's, show remarkable improvement in recall and memory, probably as good as any drug that's been tried. So there's all kinds of ways music can be helpful. I think as a musician, I would say I have to play it every day, or two things happen. I'm not happy, and I don't get good luck. Like, I notice that my good luck follows me playing music every day. It's kind of like a superstition. But when I'm playing music, and what I do is half the time I play piano, I play songs from books that I never played before. I force myself to learn new songs every week, especially the weekend. And I think that's really good for the brain as you get older. But also music teaches you how to think out of the box and improvise. And if you train the brain to improvise, even just with music, when you get back to the lab, you're going to come up with more, progressive, forward-thinking experiments that you might not have done. Because success breeds success. So expression, creativity, and music can breed creativity and expression of new ideas in science.
Perfect, yeah. Looking back on your career, how has your identity as a musician informed your scientific perspective? And conversely, how has your science informed your music?
All my life, music's always been interspersed with my science. In a career way, it's kind of funny because when I was in high school, I got to play with, at that time, a very famous guitar player. He was the guitarist for Deep Purple, Richie Blackmore, who wrote the song Smoke on the Water, which you may not know, but if you heard it, has a famous beginning riff, bum, 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 bum. So I was playing with him, and then he told me he was breaking up Deep Purple to start a new band at that time. And after playing with him for a month or two, he offered me to play keyboards in this new band, which became a big band at the time called Rainbow. And so I had to make a decision early in life. Was I going to go on to college or go play with a professional rock band and tour the world with arguably the most famous guitarist on the planet? And I asked my dad, and my dad said, well, you can do that. Because I said, I can go to college later. He said, you can do that, but you'll never go back to college later because you'll be used to too good of a lifestyle. He goes, and also, if you're a rock musician, there's a good chance you're going to die young. So So that's what he told me. So, so I went to college, thank God. But then I always played in bands throughout college, just after college, really even up to the beginnings of grad school. I was playing constantly. And then afterwards, when I couldn't play at nightclubs anymore, I didn't have time. Because I spent 5 nights a week at some point. While I was doing the Huntington's disease gene discovery stuff with Jim Casella, I was playing 5 nights a week at bands. But I still kept recording and doing studio work, writing music, recording music. And then ironically, here I was now in 2009, and I got picked as a rock star of science, which had nothing to do with me being a rock star or anything. They picked people who were big in science in different areas to pose with rock stars. And so they had Anthony Fauci for AIDS, they had Francis Collins for the Genome Project, they had Hal Varmus for cancer, they had me for Alzheimer's disease. And I was supposed to pose with Sheryl Crow. And Fauci told me he was supposed to be with Joe Perry, actually with Steven Tyler, the lead singer from Aerosmith, but Steven Tyler was sick, so Joe Perry came, the lead guitarist, also fondly member. And Tony asked if he could switch. I don't know, maybe you like Sheryl Crow, whatever. So now Francis Collins and I were with Joe Perry. Then we were talking about exactly this type of discussion: music, creativity, how the best musicians are non-derivative and do things that are original rather than cliche, just like in science. You know, we, in my unit, we emphasize in the word research, search, not right? And then at the end of the shoot, Francis told Joe Perry, he said, Rudy and I are both musicians if you ever want to play. And I was like, oh. But Joe said, yeah, we should do like a public awareness thing for Alzheimer's. So we scheduled this thing in Washington. We played together. We put a little band together. Francis was on guitar and vocals, Joe Perry, some postdocs, me. And it went really well. And then when we got done with that, Joe said, hey, you want to come and jam with the band sometime back home in Massachusetts? And I said, yeah. And I showed up and we jammed. And then they said, we're playing the Tonight Show. At that time, it was the Jay Leno show, Tonight Show. In 2 weeks, we like the way you play. Do you want to come and play keyboards with us? So I said, okay. And then while we were practicing for the Jay Leno show in the Aerosmith studio where they were doing their new album, they said, hey, do you want to grab the new album? I said, okay. So ironically, it was science that got me back into music, because ever since then, I still continued to do recordings with people like Joe Perry and others in that time, Johnny Depp and Zach Starkey, then was our son, and various musicians. So science got me back into music again. Science took me out of music and then got me back into music again. But I've always played every day.
I know you kind of touched on this, but can you share a moment, either in your lab or on stage, when you witnessed the transformative power of music or art in someone's life?
I was always pretty amazed just at the local level, just seeing myself, even when I was a kid, before playing piano and organ and synthesizers, as a good Italian boy in Rhode Island, I played accordion. And I would go to senior living centers as a boy and play for the folks there. And I play these old Italian songs, and they're mostly Italian senior citizens. And you just see them just go from sitting there with these looks of despair and, anger or fear on their faces. And they just sit up and they smile and they get up and dance. And I think that's the first time I really saw the power of music, just as a kid. Later, I started an app, Spark Memories Radio. And the idea was, if you have a loved one with Alzheimer's, you can go to this app. This was before Pandora, Spotify, where you can just get subscriptions for music relatively cheaply. So our app was like $9.99 a month. And what we would do is we had a music server that we had access to. And then we tell the spouse or loved one, tell us the age of your patients in your family and the genre preference they might have. And then we make a song list for them. Songs that were hits when they were between 12 and 25. And then see which songs stimulate them, see which songs stimulate them in a good way, see which ones might stimulate them in a bad way, like, I hate disco, and take that off, put on, the Stones, and then the list would learn in a simple way what you should play. And I remember one email I got where someone said, well, thank you for doing this, and my father loved Peggy Lee. She was like a sultry jazz type singer. My dad loved Peggy Lee too. And she had a very famous song called Poison. And they said we played Poison. Poison came up by Peggy Lee. And the dad had been vegetative, non-responsive, non-verbal in bed for months, late-stage Alzheimer's patient. And Poison came on by Peggy Lee, and they said he just woke up, sat up in bed, and started telling this story about this red pickup truck he had, and how he took his prom date to the prom in the red pickup truck, and Poison was on the radio. And they said that was great, but then, because they're disinhibited, he started going into details of what happened after the prom, which was a little uncomfortable, but they were thrilled that he woke up. And so I had lots of emails like that where it just made a big difference directly in people's lives.
That's incredible.
Now, Spark Memories Radio ended because when Spotify and Pandora came out, you could pay $9.99 per month and just pick the decade of music, and that did the job. You didn't need to have, and you could still pick which songs not to have and stuff. So
That's an incredible story.
That killed our app.
But the idea was amazing.
No,
And it was
yeah.
still before all of that.
It was when like there was still iTunes and probably Pandora was around. I don't think Spotify was around yet. But it was just getting into that transition where you could get music you wanted at any time, relatively cheaply.
Yeah.
It was right around that transition time.
Okay. Many families feel powerless when a loved one begins to lose their memories. How can creative expression help preserve a sense of identity even when the memory fades?
Well, artistic expression doesn't go away. I mean, we're not AI, right? Our circuitry may go that allows us to work like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Grok or whatever. But what really, the big difference between us and AI, humans and AI, is you can teach an AI to look at famous art or listen to famous music and then create borrowed versions of that. But there's no actual creative spark inside. Like what makes us uniquely human is the ability to have a creative spark, to look in with awe at beauty, to have sacred moments that are unexplained and are not logical or rational, right? You can teach an AI to act like that. And with a patient, all of the logical circuitry and the brain circuits that allow you to put what you're seeing or sensing in context, what we take for granted, start to go away. For example, when an infant sees a red shoe, first sees a red shoe, it's like, doesn't know anything about the red shoe. Doesn't know it's a shoe, doesn't know it's mom's shoe. And then slowly he learns, oh, that's mommy's shoe. And it's the color red. I like that color. And it's like the thing I put on my feet. Well, your brain has to tell you that. And the part of the brain that gives context like that to incoming sensory information is exactly the part of the brain that slowly gets erased in Alzheimer's. But that spark of stimulation of seeing color, seeing shape, seeing beautiful things, whether it's a painting or a music, doesn't go away. That's where they live somewhere inside, right? They're inside, still living in that world. And in fact, when they truly lose connection with their personality, with what's called the default mode network that creates who you are, that allows you to judge situations, they live in a very abstract and artistic world inside. So if you give them a chance to express that with a paintbrush, with a drum, or if they're already a musician with an instrument, that's when you get them back. And you can start stimulating parts of the brain with music that would otherwise have become deadened as the synapses and neurons were lost, like in the hippocampus.
How do you feel the Foundation's model complements or differs from other therapeutic or care interventions in dementia research and treatment?
But I think it's by tapping into the true inner essence of a patient whose personality is being robbed of them. And this disease is a thief that robs you of yourself, robs your loved ones of yourself. Yourself, simply defined as your personality, right? Your personality is one part of yourself. And I like to say that in an Alzheimer's patient, inside that artistic, beautiful, expressive person is still there. They're still in there. They may not be able to express it either with words or facial expressions, right, which may just be numb, but they're in there, right? And I think the Foundation's uniquely allowing that to shine. You're uniquely allowing people to show they're still there. How beautiful is that, right? I wrote a song with Chris Mann where the proceeds are going to Cure Alzheimer's Fund. It's called Remember Me. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it's a song that says, remember me, I'm still here, right? I'm in here. More recently, I wrote another song with a very famous musician and composer, Desmond Child, who actually has, I think, the most top 10 hits as a single person, only after Lennon and McCartney. He wrote all the Bon Jovi songs, Aerosmith songs, tons of songs that were big hits in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Now I think he's doing Broadway. But we wrote a song that we didn't release yet that's called Somewhere Inside of You. I know you're in there, somewhere inside of you. And it celebrates exactly what's inside the person that the Foundation is bringing out, both for loved ones, the world, and for the patient, him or herself.
That's beautiful, yeah. How might the work of the Foundation feed back into research in Alzheimer's disease or other brain health fields?
I think you should publish and put out there what you're learning, and every win you get, every failure you get with this approach should be made public and put out there so people can learn from it. Whether it's just a senior living center learning from you and doing something more with music, or whether it's a therapeutic or a new clinical trial using music. You can go both in the scientific directions and just patient well-being, whether it's at a daily Alzheimer's senior center or a senior living center, whether it's an Alzheimer's wing. Put what you learn out there, and I think it will just bifurcate into those both science, medicine, and trials and therapies, and also into just bettering patients' and families' lives.
With so much happening in AI, precision medicine, and neurotechnology at the moment, how do you see creative expression-based interventions fitting into the future landscape of brain health?
I think we need to preserve artistic expression, whether it's teaching someone to paint or giving them a drum to beat or an instrument they know how to play or teaching them an instrument. We have to preserve artistic expression that comes from the most central source of what makes us human, from what some would say is the soul. Okay, and AI won't do this. So maybe we can use AI to program set lists and music for patients. An AI tool maybe will learn what is the best music to play for 70 people in a senior living center in the recreation room that hits all 70 of them. AI can be used as a tool to guide and program. But it will never replace people creating art.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure an AI could create an incredible piece of art, but its source was derivative. It was taking what's already out there and reshaping it. And like my very first conversation I had with Joe Perry,
while we were both getting makeup for our Rock Stars of Science shoot. A video, I believe, that's online, because the Rock Stars of Science people put the video online somewhere. And we had this intense conversation, first time we met, about how the best musicians find influence from wherever to do something totally new and go out of their way to not be cliche or derivative. You know, I was listening to a song this morning by the Stranglers. I think they're an 80s band. And they were doing a cover of Walk On By, the 60s song. And I thought it was pretty good. And then the keyboard solo started, and I said, well, I didn't know they had a keyboardist who could improvise so much. Then listening to it, I'm saying, this is exactly what Joe Perry and I said not to do. Like, the solo went on for about 4 minutes, and the guy was talented technique-wise, but everything he did was one cliche after another. It was hard to hear just one single set of original notes.
Yeah.
Now, when you hear Joe Perry play guitar, right, you always know it's Joe Perry because he's always playing out of the box. He's always just playing, you know, he couldn't play cliche if he wanted to. And I'm trying to, and the same thing with Keith Jarrett on the piano, who was my idol. Or Bill Evans. You listen to these guys' solos, and they go out of their way to just clear the mind, no thought, no chance to be derivative, search deep inside and let it come out. That's what an Alzheimer's patient still has. Allowing that to come out is the best thing you can do for them. And music will serve that purpose, so will graphic art. But AI will never take that place of that. They can just help guide it.
Do you believe that non-pharmacologic therapies like music could one day be prescribed with the same seriousness as medication?
Yeah. I mean, we did a pharmacological intervention trial. We did a non-pharmacological lifestyle intervention trial with Dean Ornish this past year. It came out over the summer. And it was based on my SHIELD acronym. So we wanted to make sure to get enough sleep. The H in SHIELD is handling stress. The I is making them interact with others through Zoom. E was exercise. L was lectures, learning new things through Zoom. D was diet. We gave them a vegan, plant-based diet, which is good for the gut microbiome. Bottom line is that the trial worked. It was a small trial, 50 people, 20 weeks, but our effects on cognition, using the same test they used for the 2 recently approved Alzheimer drugs, we did better. Small trial, see if it holds up. But part of it was to use music, my music, and that for stress, we gave them these glasses I invented, and I can show them to you. So I invented these glasses that they shine light. So you get multicolored lights from LEDs here, making different patterns, like concentric circles or waves going back and forth. And the lights are constantly flashing. And originally the lights flash at where we are now, 17 or 18 hertz. That's the attention brainwave. But if you have a really good meditation and relax, you'll get down to theta, which is 7.8 hertz. And in fact, if you fall asleep, you'll get down to 4 hertz, right, the lowest one. So we sent these glasses to everyone in the trial. And then I wrote and composed music. It's electronic, ambient electronica. In the music, I'm improvising extemporaneously to the light flashing, so as you're going down into that more relaxed state, the music's going with you. And every patient who was on the protocol used the glasses. They loved them. It was one of the most things they most talked about. They still doing the glasses today. And they all commented how relaxing the music was, and together with the light. So I want to do a trial one day just using this alone with music and light flashing, down to 7, down to theta. I would also like to see a trial where we just play music from their teen years and early adulthood that stimulates the brain again, gets the hippocampus going again. Maybe you do that and then give them a word recall before and after, right? Or versus a control group. I think all of these things should be done. Maybe they're being done, for all I know. But I think there's huge potential for non-pharmacological lifestyle interventions, including music and brain entrainment. So yeah, I'm all for that. We think it will help a lot of people because a lot of people don't know how to meditate.
Yeah.
And some would say, I actually wrote the foreword for a book once. It was called, If You're Meditating, You're Doing It Right. I mean, just as long as you're trying to just clear the mind. But some people can't stop the monkey chatter. They can't, it's really hard for them to delicately sweep away thoughts and feelings that come their way. It's an art to meditate. Like, the guru who I've read so much of, Guru Deva, the Kauai Monastery, he wrote, having a very successful meditation is as hard as running a marathon, right? It takes a lot of work. The glasses do it for you. So it's not exactly the same, but at the end of the day, you want your brain waves to get you down to theta, which is also called the Schumann frequency of the Earth. You're in tune with the frequency of the Earth. So we just do that. We do that for you in a half hour with glasses.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I think it helped the patients a lot. I really do. Closure, I'm a founder of that company doing that, so I don't want to disclose that.
From a research perspective, what is the current evidence base for creative expression in terms of music and art, improving cognitive function, emotional resilience, or quality of life in people facing Alzheimer's or other neurodegenerative diseases?
Well, I think we've learned a lot of that anecdotally. There's a story of the woman in the nursing home who's 90 who doesn't speak, but tell her to play any song and she plays it perfectly. Look at Glenn Campbell, who had advanced Alzheimer's and was doing concerts until the day he passed, right? I think he played a show the day he actually died. But I think we have a dearth of clinical trials actually getting us to real results. I mean, even with a drug, anything you're testing, anecdotal evidence only allows you, as it builds up, to do the real trial. I think we need to now start seeing more real trials, but who's going to fund them? Pharma companies are going to fund a music trial? No, right? You need foundations to raise enough money to do these trials. That's the only way we're going to get it done. That's why I applaud what you're doing. But I don't think we have a lot of enough clinical trial evidence yet, and I know it's getting there. But we surely have enough anecdotal evidence to say there's something there.
Great. For caregivers and or family members of individuals with Alzheimer's, what message would you like to share about the value of creative expression in the context of care and connection?
Provide a creative outlet. Whatever tiny bit of talent that person may have had, or talent, large or small, if it's a canvas and a paintbrush, if it's a 3D graphic design thing like Legos, provide an outlet for creativity. And many times it's easiest to do that with music. If you have a piano or a guitar, give them an instrument. Let them stop fooling around with it, even if they don't know how to play. On the other side of the coin, play the music they loved when they were teens and young adults, because it's going to stimulate them. Keep track of the songs that make them happy versus upset them, right? And adopt the playlist as needed. But I think starting with just playing music as much as you can. There are people who tell me that for their loved ones with Alzheimer's, they play music all day long, with the Sonos system or something like that. And if they turn it off, it's like an off switch for the patient. Meaning, if it's a patient who's agitated and angry, they go back to being agitated and angry rather than calm and content. Or if it's a patient who's vegetative and non-responsive, they go back from being interactive with their eyes, trying to speak, showing signs of recognition, back to just going inside. So use music like a tool. Use all artwork, visual and auditory, like a tool. And then see if we can get them to do it even better.
We have one last question.
If you had to pick one major outcome you hope the foundation will achieve in the next 3 to 5 years, what would it be and why?
Just one? Can you do two?
You
Or a
do
few, yeah.
multiple.
Yeah, I'd say awareness, public awareness about the importance of music in the ways we just discussed, to help patients. And I'd say second, bang the drum, excuse the pun, and allow and raise money to stop pilot trials. If you can get people to donate money and then come to the McCann Center for Brain Health, where we're happy to do a lifestyle intervention trial. Or help us with our own funding we already have to put together a trial with music, right? Be our partners to get the patients recruited, go to the senior living centers or their homes and get patients recruited to do a trial with us that we could help sponsor or fund, or go to another center or foundation. So whether you raise money to get it done or just provide the legwork and the hands to get it done, I would suggest you move in that direction so that someday we can say, it's not just anecdotal, we have clinical evidence that music helps. And in the meantime, keep playing music for them and encourage them to try to play music.